Standing for the prayers from Augusta Gabriel, our chaplain. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we do indeed thank you for tonight. We pray your blessing upon this meeting. We pray that you will grant us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of what we are to do, to say, and to encourage tolerance and respect. We ask this in the blessed name of our Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ, who taught us when we pray to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. And thank you. Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? No apologies, thank you. Declarations of interest. Can councillors please declare the type of interest, if there is anyone? Oh, so sorry. Councillor Blackman, do forgive me.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 8, motions at council. The motion which refers to the local government pay settlement. From the 1st of September, I've been appointed as a member of the National Joint Committee, which determines local government employees' pay. So it's a personal interest, Mr Mayor, appointed by the LGA, so I will remain in the room.
Thank you. Any more? Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting held on 28th of June and the 19th of July 2017. Your pages are 1 to 6. Is this a true and correct record? All in favour? Agreed? Thank you. Announcements. I have in receipt of a letter of appreciation from Brigadier Rafferty MBE, the Colonel of the Duke of Lancaster's Regiment, for the Council granting the regiment freedom of the borough. I'll just read one paragraph. The Kingsmen who took part were immensely proud and appreciated the spontaneous warmth of the welcome. The hard work that went into pulling the event together was clear. Throughout, the care that went into the planning and delivery of the day was evident and made it very special. I think that's a very welcome letter from the Colonel of the Regiment, and it was a very proud day, I think, for all of us, granting the freedom of the borough. Thank you. I now have a request on the Blackpool Council and Faith Communities Partnership. It was launched yesterday, and there is something, we have something there for signing. If you wish to sign for the Blackpool Council and Faith Communities Partnership, anyone that would like to sign it, it will be available after the meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Public presentations. Ms Zoe Welch has requested to address the Council on behalf of Star Buddies Breastfeeding Peer Support Programme. Are you here, Ms Welch? Thank you. If you have 5 minutes, and a light will go on after 4 minutes if needed. Thank you.
Mr Mayor and elected members of the Council, thank you for letting me talk today about breastfeeding support in Blackpool. Blackpool Council's priorities include reducing health inequalities, improving physical and mental health outcomes for our families, early intervention, building community resilience and reducing social isolation. Breastfeeding goes a long way to addressing these priorities. It protects babies from lung, tummy and ear infections and from cot death. If all premature infants in the UK receive breast milk, the deaths of around 250 babies could be prevented each year. Breastfed children have a 13% lower risk of obesity, a 35% lower risk of type 2 diabetes, and a 50% lower risk of tooth decay as they grow. Breastfeeding also protects mothers, lowering their risk of postnatal depression, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, heart disease, breast and ovarian cancer. Across the UK, around 865 cases of breast cancer could be avoided each year through better breastfeeding rates. When it comes to health inequalities, former director of UNICEF says, breastfeeding is a natural safety net against the worst effects of poverty. Exclusive breastfeeding goes a long way towards cancelling out health difference between being born into poverty or being born into affluence. In Blackpool, the Star Buddies breastfeeding peer support and infant feeding leads have been integral to supporting mothers to breastfeed here for over 10 years. Our petition, with over 1,000 signatures and comments, shows how much mothers valued that service. Without the Star Buddies, many would certainly have given up breastfeeding. In the first 5 years, the continuation rates increased from 18 to 27%, an increase of 50%, and they've maintained that standard throughout. But this support no longer exists. In June, Public Health Blackpool took the decision to remove funding for the Star Buddies, the peer support programme, and the infant feeding lead, who led the training and coordinated that whole service. They gave no explanation and acted against both Public Health England and NICE guidelines. The Star Buddies here in Blackpool were praised by UNICEF, and NICE said the service was an example for other local authorities to follow when commissioning their breastfeeding peer support. The Director of Public Health says that Star Buddies will be replaced by an enhanced health visiting service. National guidelines from NICE and the Department of Health and from Public Health England is very, very clear. Breastfeeding peer support is essential, and it's distinct from the support that's provided by healthcare professionals. Peer support is key. It underpins all of the guidance and the stories from the women who live in our town, in your wards, and it's relatively inexpensive. Indeed, it quickly pays for itself through the reduced healthcare costs. Through the Star Buddies, Blackpool was able to meet all of the NICE guidelines on infant feeding, as well as providing support on the neonatal unit, additional support for pregnant women with diabetes. We're not aware of any other commissioned service in the whole of the country that can make that claim. Getting help from a health professional is not the same as getting help from another mum who has breastfed her baby, who comes from your own area, and who understands exactly who you are and where you are at that moment. Our Star Buddy service cannot be replicated by a health visitor in the limited time that they have available. Peer support goes deeper. It was working within our communities and encouraging mums who had been supported themselves to access free training so that they could use that experience and help other families in Blackpool. This service was enriching our communities, providing skills to women in all areas of Blackpool and offering true peer support to families who might otherwise not engage in services. We welcome the changes to the structure of the health visiting service, but families don't see their health visitor after the birth of their baby until around 10 days. Most of those who need breastfeeding support will have given up by then. Public Health England recently produced detailed commissioning guidance here on infant feeding for local authorities. It emphasises peer support as an essential part of evidence-based approach. It says commissioners in local authorities must work with NHS providers, local organisations and service users to develop the right strategy for each community. This guidance was endorsed by the Chief Medical Officer, who said, failure to invest in breastfeeding leads to poorer health outcomes for children and women today and for generations to come. We recognise great success in some areas of breastfeeding, such as peer support. I urge you all to seize this opportunity, read this guidance, and consider how best to ensure that more of our babies are breastfed in the future. We echo her sentiment and call for this council to ensure that its public health department works with the NHS Trust, finds the funding necessary and consults with families in Blackpool on the creation of a new breastfeeding peer support programme. As elected representatives, we ask you to instigate a scrutiny committee to review that decision and plan future provision for Blackpool. It's within your power to support mothers to breastfeed, thereby reducing social isolation, building community resilience, improving health and reducing inequalities for all.
Excuse me,
now
Ms. Walsh.
and in the future.
Ms. Walsh, I'm afraid your 5 minutes are up.
That was me finished. I've done.
Oh, may I congratulate you on your timing and the words you've spoken. Thank you. Councillor Cross to respond?
It was, Mr. Mayor.
It was.
But we've just been having a chat on the bench here. We did have a response prepared, but actually Mrs. Walsh has said a number of things that I don't think we've taken sufficient account of. So rather than give the response that we had, I'd like to offer a meeting with the breastfeeding buddies, along with myself and Councillor Cross and the Director of Public Health, so we can talk a little bit more about that, because some of the evidence that she's brought to us tonight we certainly weren't aware of just having a chat here, and there's absolutely no point in having public representations if we don't listen to and act on what people come and say. So my office will be in touch to make those arrangements, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I trust that meets with your approval, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Now we move on onto the executive reports, and it's the page 9, and the leader of the council, Councillor Blackburn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It has allegedly been the summer recess. Not that you'd have noticed. We've been fairly busy, and I'd just like to thank Councillor Campbell and Councillor Kane and all of the members on both sides for all of the hard work that they've done over the summer. It has, as you can see from our report, been reasonably busy. We've acquired an airport over the summer, which, as members may have noticed. I'm sure you haven't got any questions at all about that. The update, really, Mr. Mayor, that I'd like to give is in regard to the combined authority. Members may know that we had a meeting of the Shadow Combined Authority, which I chaired in Preston yesterday. Now, what I imagined would happen at that meeting was that we would decide that, due to the withdrawal of 3 councils, namely Wyre, who were never really in it in the first place, Fylde and now the Ribble Valley, that we would decide not to pursue the combined authority any further. And my hope was that the best we could get out of that meeting was agreement that we would form a looser affiliation, perhaps called something like the Lancashire Councils Association, where we would talk about whatever we wanted to talk about and joint work in those areas that we were interested in, and that would be the best we could get out of it. I had also hoped at that point that I might be able to surrender the chair, as it's quite an onerous task. However, we received a letter from Jake Berry, the Northern Powerhouse Minister, who I met with during the summer recess to show him around the new conference centre site. And following on from my discussion with him, it now appears that the option of a non-mayoral combined authority is on the table. This was something that was promised in the most recent Conservative manifesto in the June general election, and it appears clear that they meant it. So armed with that information, the Lancashire leaders yesterday took a rather different view, that if the government is now dropping what's always struck us as a rather peculiar insistence upon an elected mayor, that we will go away and consult with our own councils again to see whether or not those 3 councils who have recently decided they don't want to take part might in fact change their mind. So that is very much in the hands of those 3 councils. It's not for me to interfere, but we will meet again in October and see where we've got to. I hope to get some clarity from the Secretary of State as to what a non-mayoral combined authority might look like. But seeing as the publicly stated objection from most people to this plan was the mayor, to have that removed certainly helps to move progress. So I await our next meeting in October with anticipation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Page by page. Thank you. Right, thank you. It's the executive report. We now have agenda item 5. We go through it page by page. Corporate issues, page 9. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a general question on the terms of reference about locality and council tax collection. I just wondered if the leader could tell us that with this term locality and its identification of which areas within the file are paying more and which are paying less, if that can be narrowed down to specific areas, specific streets, so we know which areas to target in terms of fixing their lack of payment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any more on page 9? Page 10. Thank you, Councillor Mrs Callow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The financial monitoring. I notice here that we've highlighted some financial pressures emerging, and one of them is on the Business Loans Fund. I wonder if the Leader of the Council could explain what this is. Does this mean that people are not paying their loans back that this council gave them to help them with their businesses? And if he could tell us just how difficult this is and if it's a real problem. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Not at all. More on page 10? Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On the same paragraph, financial monitoring, I notice here that the estimated working balances are to fall by 3,475,000 against budget. In my reckoning, I think that's now the reserves are down to just over 2 million, which is the lowest they've been in the history of this council. Well, if they've been much lower, it's certainly before my 10 years tenure. Then it goes on to say that we have 9 months to recoup this and to make it clever. Well, my maths ain't great, but we don't have 9 months. We have less than that. Why we've got ourselves in such a situation, and please don't use the obvious excuses, but why are we down to this? When you did project that they would return to normal long before this. And what are the real prospects of us getting back to a healthy state of reserves in the time you suggested? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any more questions on page 10? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a quick question about the Lancashire Energy HQ. I'm hearing rumours that it's not scheduled to be in use until around 2020, 2021. Can the Leader of the Council confirm when that centre will actually be in operation as opposed to being open? And what are we going to do about getting it into operation sooner? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Page 10? We seem to have got through that page. Page 11. Thank you, Councillor Mr Callow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What I'm trying to find out is that if there's any truth in the rumour that Blackpool Council are buying the Warren Drive land. This is being circulated all around that area and, well, it's a yes or no, isn't it? Quite simple. Are you buying the land or not? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more on page 11? Councillor Mrs Callow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mine is under any other business, so I don't know if I can speak now or... Yeah, is that all right? Thank you. I've recently been on holiday. I don't usually buy a daily paper, but seeing that I've got some time on my hands, I bought the Daily Mail. Right. But the headlines here, this is on September the 13th, said, the towns where house prices never recovered. Parts of London has seen prices double. And this is after the crash of 10 years ago. And the top of the list for the whole country is Blackpool. Now, that really does concern me, Mr Mayor, when we're ahead of towns and cities like Sunderland, Preston, Rotherham. Here we are, the prices of an average house in June 2007 was £124,492, and now it is £105,406, a price fall of a thumping 15%. Now, this does concern me because we've now got the Enterprise Centre. We're creating jobs there, hopefully, and we're wanting to encourage people to come and live in Blackpool. But who is going to buy a house in this town when we're getting headlines like this? It's not a good investment, and it's not a good investment for people here and the people who already own properties, because the majority of people have got their life savings and all the money in the world wrapped up in their houses, and the fact that the house prices are going down means that if we wanted, not that I do, but if you wanted to move to another town, it would be nigh on impossible. So I was very concerned when I saw this, and I wondered what the leader of the council would like to say about it, and also I'd like to hear his concerns. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. My next one was Councillor Galley. Thank you.
Just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, are we on page 11?
It's page 11.
We are on page 11. Sorry, right. That's what confused me. No, that's okay. That's cool. So I've got one for general as well. Just in terms of the leader's comments, Mr. Mayor, about the combined authority and potential changes that the minister spoke of. In terms of some of the issues, and we just picked up on this locality issue earlier in his report about the way authorities on the Fylde Coast are working increasingly together and sharing services. One of the concerns previously was that this part of Lancashire didn't connect with the other parts of Lancashire and vice versa. Surely the option should be, Mr. Mayor, that the leader's pushing for more of a Fylde combined authority and continue the work that's already been started on a practical level that we see every day.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams, page 11.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, any of the business, I think we exhausted page 11. And I'm following on from Councillor Mrs. Callum, Mr. Mayor. I can probably answer, or partly answer, the questions he asked. Not only has Blackpool got one of the highest rates of devaluation in properties, it's the second worst town in England for women to live. It's got the highest rate of alcohol and drug deaths. It's got a bad rate of adult education. But the good news is we've got one of the best mobile phone receptions in England. Yeah, brilliant. So while we're papering ourselves with all these magnificent achievements along the promenade, what about the residents? What about the people whose lives are suffering because of the ineffectiveness of some of the issues that are happening in this council, especially in looked after children? You can't shake your heads. I didn't invent the figures. I didn't invent the figures. They're there. And I didn't read them in the Mail. I think it was The Guardian. Right, beg your pardon. I did have one other question for Councillor Blackburn. Some time ago, when we were talking about the revitalisation of the centre of Blackpool and retail, he made a comment in public that said he would not accept pile 'em high and sell 'em cheap shops. Does he stand by that now, or has he changed his mind?
Thank you. Councillor Galley, you'd like to speak on page 11 again?
No, sorry, general. Are you on general?
Oh, general,
Sorry.
do forgive me.
Sorry, no. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was just to acknowledge, I was going to comment in Councillor Kane's point about this, but as the leader picked up on it in response to Zoe's excellent speech, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity for taking your time to go and speak with them, the young mums and so on. I've met up with them on several occasions, and they've taught me a huge amount about the importance of peer support over sometimes an official person with a lanyard instructing you on what to do when they may not have the heart behind it. So I just wanted to thank him for that, because there are certain concerns. The bits that I've learned that concern me was it's not the rate that starts breastfeeding, it's where you are in 8 weeks and 12 weeks. And in addition, where the Better Start funding is going, because this was never actually a funding cut, it was a funding strategic decision to switch it to something else. So I just wanted to support the leader in his decision to meet with Zoe and her friends and her colleagues, and give them all the support, because they are doing a great job out there in some very challenging circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Still under general questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. On the 13th of March, at another meeting, I brought up the question of the Christmas markets in Blackpool, and Councillor Campbell was attending that meeting, and she said she would get back to me on that subject. I was just wondering how we're getting on with the Christmas markets, please. Thank you.
No other speakers? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Councillor Galley, yeah, the locality mapping within the council tax system is used for exactly the purpose you describe. It helps us to understand where people are most likely to pay and ergo where people are least likely to pay, so that we can point point as much of our activity as possible to early intervention in those areas where we know people are less likely to pay. But just as an aside, and members may find this interesting, we decided to write out to everybody who was claiming the single person discount on their council tax, just as a bit of a nudge to, just in case anybody had forgotten that they weren't entitled to it. And that's brought in nearly £100,000 in extra council tax this year. It's amazing the number of people whose husbands or wives had moved back in only a few days before they received our letters. We've been responsible for the reconciliation of about 400 couples, as far as I can establish. So having that intelligence about where the issue is, so we know, because we provide this service for the filed, we know the reports of the filed course where there's streets and streets and streets of really nice houses where everybody pays a council tax in full on the day that they get the bill. We also know that in parts of my ward, in parts of Talbot and in parts of Claremont, it's a much bigger struggle. So yeah, and that is reaping dividends. Councillor Mrs Callow, quite happy to explain what that means. It doesn't mean that people aren't repaying loans. What it means is I announced a £100 million loan fund in our budget in February, and in order for that to start generating revenue for the council, we've got to get that money out of the door and lent to people. What we're finding is that the due diligence process for getting all of that signed off, our lawyers and the would-be company's lawyers, it's all taking a lot longer than we thought. So that's the pressure there. It's just because we need to get the money out of the door in order to start the repayments coming back in and making a little chunk of profit on that. So until we can sign off in a big way on those loan deals, what I can say is that we are looking at somewhere in the region, assuming our current due diligence work is completed, we're looking somewhere in the region of getting about £37 million out the door already this year. So when repayments start coming back in from that will help. Councillor Williams, have faith. Have faith. We'll listen to what the Reverend Augusta said at the start of the meeting. Yeah? Reserves, we always knew, and I've said this countless times, that this financial year, 17-18, was going to be the toughest year this council has faced in its history. And as a consequence, our reserves dip mid-year, right? They always do, and you guys always stand up and have a go at me about it. And if you remember, when Councillor Callow was a leader and you were in the Cabinet, I used to do exactly the same thing to you. So I absolutely respect the question, but have faith, it'll all be all right in the end. We were completely straightforward, completely transparent, as I'm sure were you, Councillor Callow, when you sat in this seat. Councillor Galley, the Energy College is open and there are students in it. There is a delay in terms of either is it onshore or offshore oil and gas? Yeah, so there's a delay, but we're talking months rather than years in part of it. But the college is open, there are students in there, and it all seems to be going on marvellously, as far as I know. But if there's more to it than that, I'm sure I'll find out now you've asked the question. Councillor Callow, if we were planning a major land transaction on the Warren Drive site, the last thing I'd do is talk about it here in front of the cameras and all of these fine people up there, because it would be subject to commercial confidentiality. As ever, as and when there's anything for you to know, I'll make sure you know. That means, what it means is, I don't know. but even if I did, I wouldn't tell you, is what it means. Absolutely. Councillor Mrs. Callow, I mean, the first thing I'd say is these, and sort of picks up on some of the stuff that Councillor Williams was venturing forth on. All these surveys that are published during July and August, because, well, July, August, September, are published because it's the only time of year that anybody would take them seriously. That there is an issue with the Blackpool housing market is a given. It's something that your administration tried to deal with for 4 years. It's been at the front and centre of everything we've done since we came to power 6.5 years ago. Getting 3,000 to 5,000 jobs on the enterprise zone will definitely increase demand for housing. Selective licensing and improving the quality of properties increases demand for housing, because you are not going to buy a house on some of the streets that we have where 80% of homes are occupied by a wide variety of private tenants, then absentee landlords. We all know examples of people who are owner-occupiers on streets like that who cannot sell the houses for love and money. Yeah? Selective licensing, there's been a very exciting meeting only in the past 48 hours with the Department of Communities and Local Government about what we can do further in terms of selective licensing, and I look forward to being able, Councillor Wright being able to update the council at a later date on that. We've engaged in, we've deconverted a lot of our properties back into family homes. We've knocked down a lot of properties on the Queen's Park estate and elsewhere. We've built a lot of new homes, both for ownership, for part ownership and for social rent, at the end of Seaside as well, near the football club. We've done a huge amount. The work of the Blackpool Housing Company in buying up nasty property and turning it into nice property is having an impact. But these are changes that will take a generation to before we see the real impact. But I have to say, clamping down on dodgy private sector landlords will and is having exactly the effect we intended, which is lowering the prices of those properties, because it's not as easy for them to be bad landlords in Blackpool as it used to be. So they're having to spend more money on the properties, so we are starting to kick the bottom out of that bit of the market. And that's great, because what that will do is bring those properties into the price range of first-time buyers, and those buildings will once again enter the housing market as family homes, which was what they were intended to do in the first place. I'm absolutely not dismissive of the question. It's a perfectly valid question. What I ask her to do is to look at all of the things we are doing to tackle this, and the amount of effort that goes in, but that needs to be sustained effort, and it needs to be sustained over 10, 15, 20 years. We're only sort of 7.5 years into the selective licensing scheme. We've only been able to do certain parts of the town. I'm saying that because, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm saying 7.5 years because Councillor Mrs. Callow is very proud of the fact that she introduced the first selective licensing scheme to full council. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Quite happy to meet with you and talk more about that. But, you know, I think that there's immediate effects, there's short-term effects, and there's longer-term effects. We are going to see the longer-term effects coming in. But doing things like creating 5,000 jobs on the enterprise zone will be a huge boost. Councillor Galley, a filed combined authority. If you want to go and talk to the Conservative groups in Filed and Wire about that, knock yourself out. No problem at all. I know my limits, and I've done what I can do. But if you're a better man than I, if you can get them to agree to that, but good luck if you can. We do, of course, in all seriousness, Mr. Mayor, we do huge amounts of joint working with Filed and Wire. For all of the public statements that have come out from certain groups of councillors in those places, there's, you know, immediately after the rant on Radio Wave, they pick the phone up and say, can we come and talk to you about X, Y or Z? So, yeah, lots of joint working done. Happy to continue to do that. The combined authority is in no way a threat to that, whether there was or wasn't a combined authority. We would, of course, continue to work closely with our partners in Filed and Wire. I'm sort of the view, I think, that we'll end up delivering social care and health provision on a Blackpool Filed and Wire footprint before long, because it just makes sense to do so. As some members will know, I used to be a social worker for Lancashire County Council. Their children's services footprint here is filed and wire. So I used to spend all day driving from Fleetwood to Kirkham, then up to just outside Lancaster and back again. Potty. You put it all together and do it in one unit. But the work that Councillor Kane's doing and Councillor Cross is doing in terms of the new accountable care system, working with colleagues at the CCG and at the Hospital Trust in terms of the Sustainable Transformation Plan for the NHS, is bringing all of that together. So I see that as complementary to a combined authority, not a threat to it or in competition to it. Councillor Williams, well, I made the point about some of the summer season polls and reviews. I mean, the one that says that Blackpool is the second worst place in the country for women to live. Yeah, I think quite a lot of women would disagree quite strongly with that. The worst place, incidentally, to live apparently is Islington. So I mean, quite what their comparators are for coming up with that. It may be Jeremy Corbyn. I very much doubt it. He's a very nice man, and from whom, incidentally, you could learn a lot. His second question, though, was, so I said in the Gazette a couple of days ago that I would not accept Pileham High and Selham cheap shops in the central business district, was what I said. In the central business district. So if he's talking about what I think he's talking about, he's quite wide of the mark. Clearly, there is a market in Blackpool for pound shops, for charity shops, etc., etc. That market, however, is not underneath Bickerstaff House. It's not in the bus station. It's not in the central business district. It's not a bus station. It's a car park. But it's not having cheap shops in it. Whatever it is. Whatever it is. I mean, they want a bus station. They want a bus station. So, yeah, there's two ways of dealing with that situation in the central business district. We can lose our nerve now, and we can not... Are you listening? No. He's not listening, Mr. Mayor. We pay him a lot of money to listen.
I'll castigate him if necessary.
Thank you. Good. We can lose our nerve now, and we can rent those couple of empty units out to people that don't want to pay the right sort of rent. Or we can hold our nerve. And I very strongly suggest, I don't suggest, I'm telling you, we are going to hold our nerve, and we are going to rent them out to the right people at the right time, rather than act in haste and worry about it later. Councillor Scott, you asked a question that, yeah, I presume you meant to ask Councillor Campbell, because I'm not, and indeed never have been accountable for her behaviour. I'm sure she'll pick that up in her report. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Page 13, Deputy Leader of the Council, Tourism, Economic Growth and Jobs, Councillor Gillian Campbell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Present my report. Happy to take any questions. Just one slight update that isn't actually on here, where we talk about all the events that have taken place in Blackpool over the summer. Both you and I were delighted to take part in the UK Recovery Walk, which was all the way from South Prom to the Winter Gardens. We did it though, and we were at the front of the queue. It was amazing. I was very honoured the day before to actually open the conference. I've dealt with quite a lot with these groups over the years, and it was absolutely fabulous. There was an estimate of around 10,000 people who took part in the walk that day. And I'm proudly wearing my badge that they gave me as well. So yeah, just really to highlight that and how successful it was. And it's just a shame they can't come back next year, but they're moving on. So, but apart from that, happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Page 13.
I hate to disappoint,
Thank you very much.
so I'm on my feet. Contracts.
Councillor Clapham.
It's the second one down, Councillor Campbell. Wonderful to see that 15 bidders and only one from FY Postcard put a bid in for it. Well, postcode. Won the contract. Fantastic. Kingswood Office Supplies Limited. Very pleased to see that. I like to see more and more of those appearing in here. It's brilliant. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know you didn't pick it yourself, but
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Any more speakers on page 13? Page 14. Thank you, Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was just a question about the Highways Traffic Management Division. I found out last week that we weren't successful in a funding bid to the Department of Transport to repair a number of our road surfaces across the town. As we embarked on the Highways Asset Management Strategy, Mr Mayor, one of the things that we were always told was we're really efficient in this area and that would lead to greater funding from central government to repair our roads. So I just wondered, great disappointment to all the members in Blackpool, why we weren't successful in that bid. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any more questions on page 14? Page 15. Oh, thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just about the events programme, Livewire Festival and the Illumination Switch On. Unfortunately, I wasn't here for them. I wished I had been. I got several comments about the Livewire Festival, even from people from Fleetwood who said they enjoyed the music as well. But who am I to talk about loud bands? You know, whatever. But I did get some mixed reception about the Switch On. Some said it was interesting. Some said, well, all it was diversity and a red light. And I just wondered if that's the same sort of step you intend to take next year, or can we see a return to the normal procedure of inviting someone famous? Can't think of who. I'll give you a couple of numbers, yeah. Couple of rock rap.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Any more questions on page 15? Oh, I do. Beg your pardon. Councillor Mrs. Scott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Livewire Festival, I know a lot of people who went to the festival, but all the people that I know who went to the festival went with free tickets. Could I ask what proportion of the tickets were free and given away and what proportion of them were paid for, please?
Thank you. Any more questions on page 15? Page 16. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On the 18th of September, I was on Coronation Street and I looked up at the Winter Gardens and we got... No, I wasn't in the show. Sorry about that. I wasn't in the Rovers' return having a gin and tonic. Sorry about that.
I would have joined you. Thank you.
Right. So, in Coronation Street in Blackpool, and I noticed that the banners on the Winter Gardens, then on the 18th of September, were out of date. We had one advertising a show that was finishing on the 2nd of September, and another one advertising a show that was finishing on August the 27th. Now, it's not very professional, apart from the fact that we've still got that scaffolding there. It looks like a bomb site. It looks scruffy. All this praise about the Winter Gardens is very good, but when we're not doing some of the jobs properly, it looks extremely sloppy when we're still advertising shows that have been and gone. It looks as though we've nothing else to offer and we're filling up a space. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Page 16. Page 17. Sorry. Oh, Mrs. Callow, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is just general. It's regarding the fact that some of the lights failed with the illuminations, which is very sad. And I would just like to say how much I support Richard Ryan and all his team. I did have the privilege at one time of working with Richard, and he's an absolutely fantastic ambassador for Blackpool. I do feel sorry for him that this has blown up in his face. I do hope that he can sort it out. I'm sure he will. But I'm wondering, are we going to get any compensation from this firm that have obviously sold us lights that are not up to the required standard? I don't think we should let them get away with it. I think we should try, Mr Mayor, to get some sort of compensation from them. because some people may have come to Blackpool and thought, ooh, that's not very good. And it's not our fault. It's certainly not Richard's fault and the wonderful team that worked with him. And I would just like to say, I do sympathise with him, and I hope things are sorted out pretty quickly for him. He didn't deserve this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Gelly.
It's general, isn't it, Mr. Mayor?
It is general.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had two questions. I wanted to thank Councillor Campbell for coming back to me about the public space protection order for parks. I noticed in her response, she said that although I have requested that the signs for parks are ordered and erected as soon as possible. So again, obviously the question follows when that's likely to be. But there's a second part of that question, which is speaking to the police in dealing with certain antisocial behaviour issues in parks in Ankerslow and surrounding parks. They aren't even aware of what the public space protection order is and how that will work and what their role is. So one of the things that we'll have to do is establish that link so that they will know where their part is in this for that public space protection order to be effective. The other question I had was regards 3GS. Earlier in the year, their contract was either suspended or wasn't renewed. I'm not quite sure where it was, but it was always set out to be the initial year as a review, a trial. I just wondered what the impact has been. Has that trial happened? Will they come back? And if not, will we do our own enforcement and have a plan to deal with the build-up of littering? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Mr. Scott on general.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier this year, I brought up the subject of cycling on the top prom, particularly on the North Shore, where there's a shared path for cyclists and pedestrians. And obviously, it's a holiday area, lots of hotels. We do have visitors coming, and of course, the residents walk along the path as well. But since then, I've received a few emails. The last email I received was the 14th of September about this very subject, about the near misses with cyclists speeding on this trek. And it seems to be getting more of a problem. And the abuse that some of the walkers, the pedestrians, are getting from some of these cyclists is getting more and more aggressive, verbally and with gestures. I was wondering if we could somehow look at this and see what we can do to slow some of these bicycles down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was being driven down the promenade yesterday afternoon, and when you're in the passenger seat, you do tend to get a different perspective of what's going on. But I was amazed to see and count 8 beggars along the central promenade. And these beggars, and they don't look as though they're rough sleepers or out of workers or whatever. They actually seem to have a shift system going. They sit by all the bins. I saw one get up and somebody take his place. He was probably going for a pint or for his lunch or whatever. 8 beggars on the promenade in the middle of the day. Surely we've got to start getting to grips with this. I know you might be trying, but it's just not working at all. And another thing, while I was looking out of the windows, we were actually stuck in traffic. I noticed a guy on a bicycle which had very wide wheels, and he was dealing drugs openly along the promenade to these people begging. This is Blackpool, middle of the day. Let's do it, eh? Let's get rid of it.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any more?
Sorry, I did have one more, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll take you then, Councillor Williams, if that's all right.
I just wanted to add a remark about the figures that were shown about the millions of people that came to Blackpool in 2017, which I thought was quite remarkable. And I congratulate the people who operate all the amusements, etc., for attracting these people. But it did seem rather a lot of people. And when I calculated it down, it was actually more visitors than London got. It actually equates to almost 40,000 people every day for 365 days a year. Now, I know we do tend to sort of say, oh, we've had a great season, etc., but I would have thought that the car parking revenue, Mr. Mayor, would have reflected those extra visitors, but it doesn't. So whether they came on horseback or they walked, there was a slight increase, but nothing as a percentage against the millions of extra visitors we've got. All I can say is that whoever stands at the end of the M55 counting all these visitors, or on the promenade counting all these visitors, can we employ them to count the Conservative votes at the next election at 2019. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Forgive me, Councillor Clapham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mine's only a quickie again. I do normally come by bike. I'm quite concerned about what measures are going to be doled out by Councillor Campbell to slow some of the cyclists down. I won't be one of them. But I came by car today for a change. Turned into Talbot Square off the promenade. Couldn't turn in to my normal turning in to get to the car park behind the town hall. Absolutely full of buses, all the way down to Clifton Street. Now, it's only last council, full council, we talked about the bays that had been put in there for the buses and this transport hub. It doesn't appear to be working. Nobody but could turn in who was driving from Talbot Square. Absolutely chock-a-block. And your little aside, you're quite right, we do need a bus station. Yeah. If we've got 100 million that's been borrowed into the town and it is there to promote different ventures within the town, I'm quite sure, Gillian, the 4 million or so, or Councillor Campbell, I'm sure you could have a word and we could get a proper bus station, because it is an integral part of having a system that works.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more general comments? Right, thank you. Councillor... Oh, sorry. Oh, do forgive me. Councillor O'Hara.
I'd just like to come back on the bus station situation. I mean, let's have a bit of common sense. Where are you going to put the bus, number one? Who's going to pay for the losses on it every year? And he raised Accrington bus station. I go over that viaduct quite often and we play spot the bus. So I think the bus station, there must be a more common sense way of dealing with that situation.
Thank you. Any more general questions? Then it is Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Okay, so Councillor Clapham, procurement, 15 bidders in the quick. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, fabulous. Obviously, procurement is a very intricate thing, as I'm sure you realise. We can't just have preferred bidders because they have an FY postcode. I actually thought you were going to ask me why I'd changed it, so it was only over to her, because I've got a sheet with the other ones on it. Just in case you wanted it. But yeah, obviously, but it does rely on people bidding as well, and not some of them are very specialist things that we need in this council. But yeah, it is nice to see a Blackpool company getting a big contract like that. Councillor Galley, the highways traffic management stuff, yes. If I could, I might just prompt my cabinet member, Councillor Jackson, at the end. He may be able to give you a fuller explanation of why we didn't get the money for that. Yeah, make sure he knows. Councillor Williams, the events, the switch on. Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't like the lovely switch on that we had. And there are Facebook videos that you can see. It was very striking, very effective. But yeah, obviously we tried something new. That doesn't mean that we won't try it again, and that doesn't mean that we won't go back to the switch on star again. I'm open to all suggestions at the moment. I'm giving officers a couple of weeks off, and then we'll start having switch on conversations again. Councillor Mrs Scott, Livewire, free ticketing. The Livewire had nothing to do with the council whatsoever, apart from the fact that we gave them the headlands to perform on. So I'm not sure where that's come from myself. But the thing is that Livewire it's a new enterprise. This is their first year, and I imagine in the first couple of years they probably do give away some free tickets to generate interest. But Livewire are coming back next year and the year after, and they have made a very bold claim that next year will be even better than this year's, so I look forward to that. It is the crankies, hopefully not. Councillor Mrs Callow, Coronation Street, yeah, banners, out-of-date banners. Yeah, that's disappointing, and I shall certainly look into that and try and ensure that it never happens again. You're right, we should be advertising our new shows, because we obviously have quite a lot coming up. So yeah, I will definitely look into that. Mrs Callow again, yeah, the light failure. Just to clarify here, I have had an email. The Gazette's assertion that there are 70,000 lamps out is incorrect, and it's based on a calculation of 7% of 1 million bulbs, which is the total number, approximately, I've not counted them, of all the bulbs that we use in the entire display. The 7% quoted by Richard, in fact, relates to the percentage of LEDs within the festoons that are currently out. We carry out our own spot checks throughout the week, and the latest revealed that the total number of LEDs not operating last week was around 900. So it was greatly exaggerated, unfortunately. Richard has said that he's more than happy to meet with anyone who has any concerns and talk them through it. And yeah, it's a very windy town as well, and there's a lot of sea spray. These things happen, but what's happened with these ones is that we're told that they will last 3 years and they maybe only last in a year. But believe me, if there's any compensation to be had, we will make sure that we do have it. Councillor Galley, the PSPO signage. Yeah, I will chase that up for you. And I will also make sure that the police realise what these are all about. I'm actually the chair of Be Safe now, so that will make that conversation a little bit easier. But I'll deal with that for you. 3GS, you had the contract has finished with 3GS, and we are looking at the moment, rather than going out to recontract with a private sector partner, is to develop an in-house generic team. I'm hoping that that will be fairly swiftly, and we will be writing to ward councillors once we've got that team up and running to see whether or not they would like to almost like pay for some of that service through their ward budget if they've got hot spots and things like that that they would like them to patrol. So yeah, we'll be in touch when that's happening. Councillor Mr Scott, cycling on North Prom. Is it a shared area, Councillor Scott? Sorry. It's a shared path. Yeah. Right, okay. Yeah, that's very concerning. What I can do is I can speak to our community safety team and the police and see if we can come up with any suggestions. I'm not sure exactly how we'll deal with that, but I will try. And also your question about the Christmas markets. I do believe we have a meeting next week of the Nighttime Economy Working Group where we can discuss that there. Councillor Williams, 8 beggars dealing drugs. Can I ask, did you report them dealing drugs, Councillor? Right, fabulous. Because that's obviously what we need people to do. Believe it or not, yeah, 8 beggars, it's terrible, but it's not as bad as it was. And I'm not defending that at all. We do actually have teams that go out twice a day from all over the council and do regular checks in all the areas. It was this along south, right? Well, I will raise that as an issue. Central Prom, right, okay. We'll put that on the radar. Councillor Williams again, tourism figures. Yeah, not everyone comes by car. A lot of people come by rail and coach. We actually have a huge amount of people that come by coach, actually more than them come by rail. So, yeah, the monitors, it's not somebody clicking them in. We actually have them physically over the town, and when people pass them, they do that. Yeah. Council of Clapham, bus hub was very busy. I suppose it's going to be busier at certain times of the days than others, Councillor. Right, okay. I'll definitely look into whether or not that is an issue. I've not heard any reports that it is. I still don't have money for a bus station. I'm really sorry. and what Councillor O'Hara said. And if I could just hand over to Councillor Jackson, he may be able to give Councillor Galley a little bit more of an explanation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Right.
Mr Mayor, I haven't got the detail with me, Paul, to give it you now, but what I will do is I'll arrange a meeting, if you like, and you can come along with me. We'll meet with Will Britton and we'll talk it through with you. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Right, we now move to the Cabinet Secretary, Resilient Communities, Councillor Graham Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I present the report, may I take the opportunity to thank you personally for hosting the Blackpool Polar Bears on Saturday just gone, and previously before they went off to the Special Olympics. There's been special recognition there on Saturday from yourself. Greatly appreciated. I've had acknowledgement from the Polar Bears Committee. Really appreciated. They appreciated the trophies that you presented. And again, I want to publicly thank John Blackledge for furnishing us with those trophies. And to say that for the benefit of people that weren't here on Saturday or on the send-off that you gave them, Mr Mayor, they've done tremendously. The club itself sent 12 people to the regional games a couple of weeks ago, and all 12 of those are going on to the national facility at Leamington Spa later in the year. So they've done a fantastic achievement, fantastic for Blackpool, and I'm really, really pleased that cross-party have supported the Polar Bears, and particularly yourself. I know you've took them to heart really once you've seen them and the work that goes on there. So I would like to say again, thank you, Mr Mayor, for taking them on, and thank you for the burden that you've given me to get them trophies for when they come back from the national games, which you did in a public way, so I'll have to try and get some more trophies. But hopefully, Mr Mayor, you know, they're a credit to Blackpool. They're a multi-disability swimming club. We're really proud that we're host them at Moore Park on a Sunday for all the training that they do, and they've got another regional gala coming up on Saturday down at Palatine, which I hope that people will support them and continue their endeavours. And a thank you to the teachers that bring them up to the standard of the Special Olympic standard. So grateful appreciation to yourself, Mr Mayor, and the cross-party councillors that have supported those in their endeavours this year. And with that, Mr Mayor, I'll present the report and hopefully answer any questions that may arise.
May I just make a comment on that? And do forgive me, councillors, for interjecting here, but those youngsters are a credit to Blackpool, and I thank you all for being a part of it, because you all are. And what you said in your sentiments about all the other people involved, I totally echo. Thank you. Councillor Kane.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just present the report, and I'll try and answer as many questions that are put forward as I possibly can. Thank you.
Right. Page 19. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's a subject regarding looked after children, as Councillor Kane knows. I always ask him questions on this. And interestingly enough, it's not what's in Councillor Kane's report, it's what's not in Councillor Kane's report. At the last full council, he claimed he'd already employed a strategy consultant to work with the now looked after children division, and he promised me at that meeting he would send me details in writing of what that strategist had found. I haven't had that. I'd still like to find out. And at the same meeting, when I quoted the number of looked after children I believed we had, which was given to me by the director of the service, it varied quite differently to the number he confirmed. His number was actually over 100 more than I'd been told. I can understand the why. We have a new director, and I believe she's doing a great job and jumped in with her feet running. But there's no mention of the number in here. Why don't we have the number of looked after children in each report? I realise that it varies from day to day, but unless we measure it, we can't fix it. And I'd still like to know what the last strategist advised us to do, because whatever it is, it didn't work. And we're now going to a second consultancy. I believe it's a second consultancy. Are we going to find out what they have to say about this really, really shamefully number of looked after children, the highest in any borough in the UK. I think the last count was over 550. I've no idea what it is today, because we're not given the figures anymore. And this is costing us more than £20 million a year to deliver, and growing. And then some of the questions might be, well, why are we cutting this service? Why are we cutting that service? And that's one of the reasons why. Because it's costing us more than £20 million. I'd like more of an explanation from Councillor Kane. He promised he would put it right on more than one occasion, and it's going exactly the wrong way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Galley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had 2 points. One was the healthy weight strategy. I wondered if it included options to train people how to cook. It's something I've learnt myself in recent years, and not only does it get your bills down, but it's very healthy food now as well that I'm mastering. But it also, as I say, in this case, it helps with a health weight strategy rather than eating processed food. We could also, in terms of the subject that was raised earlier by Zoe, link that into a breastfeeding strategy across the town as well. Just to add to, though, Councillor Williams' point, in December, we were all part of something, I can just pull this up in my little box here, something called the Budget Scrutiny Review Panel. And in that panel, we looked at the budget for the next 2 to 3 years, and when it came to children's services, we had a specific target of which was 450 looked after children by 2019-2020, and that connected very much to our core financial strategy of what that department's budget should be. So to follow up on Councillor Williams' question, Mr. Mayor, will that strategy that's been proposed in this report deliver us 450 looked after children? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any more questions on page 19? No. Page 20? Thank you. I've got Councillor Galley first. And thank you, Councillor Galley.
Thank you. Just bear with me. Sorry, I'm just you've gone a bit too fast. There we go. Yeah, the Homeless Reduction Act 2017, Mr. Mayor. I just wondered how that act will reconcile itself with the local connections policy and strategy, and if it is at odds with that, or if it can be reconciled. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. And Councillor Clapham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine may be connected with the homeless reduction. 16 to 17-year-olds. It's always been a problem in terms of looked after children within the borough. Once they get to 16, 17, and then at 18, they're released, if you like, into the community as adults. But there does seem to be a number of properties up and down, certainly in Blackpool North, where there are children between the ages of 16 and 17 who occupy them, groups of about 3. And I'd like to know what sort of supervision there is actually applied to these groups living at such a young age independently. There was a situation less than a month ago on Norbreck Road where I was called, and I went to see a shop in a parade of shops covered in graffiti from top to bottom, and it turned out to be 1 or 2 of the young people living in one of the flats above a shop on Norbreck Road. No one seemed to have any input whatsoever. So will this act actually bring in control of young groups of people aged 16 and 17 independently living? Because it's a massive step to take as a young person without either a mother or father or some adult actually giving them advice on how to use the freedom that they've been given. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions on page 20? 21? Ladies first, do forgive me. I caught your eye first. Councillor, forgive me. Councillor Callow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. this transforming services, violence against women and girls, I welcome this very much indeed, but sometimes we've got to nip the problem in the bud, and I don't think that boys at an early enough age are taught to respect women and other girls. And one of the problems, as we all know, Mr. Mayor, is that nowadays there are so many fragmented families. The children are not brought up with granny, who's the head of the family, the mother, who's the matriarch. A lot of this has gone, and so it's very sad. But I do think we need to teach the boys at a very early age that they have to respect females. That females are every bit as good as them. In fact, better. I can say it, they are better. But the problem with violence, Mr. Mayor, is it's not just in the lower classes, we all know. It's throughout society. You can find police chiefs, you can find judges, doctors, surgeons, anybody. It's classless, and it is very, very worrying. But we have to get to the problem and teach young boys at a very young age that they have to respect females. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Blackburn. Oh, sorry, I thought you'd got your hand up. Yeah. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
My apologies.
It's the same subject. I very much welcome the Conservative Party's donation of 400k under the VWAG system, and it is welcome. It's not enough, but it's welcome. But I'd like to know ongoing exactly how we're going to deploy that 400,000, and if we can do some sort of measurement as to then and now, and how it does improve. I don't know how we do that, whether we do it through referrals or we do it by recorded measures, whatever. But it would like to see that that money is put to good use and that we do get results from it. Thank you.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to cause confusion. I just wanted to come in on the point that Councillor Mrs. Callow raised, and said that I absolutely agree. I sit on the National Oversight Group on Violence Against Women and Girls, which meets sort of every 6 weeks or so and is chaired by the Home Secretary. And a great deal of our effort is now being pointed in the direction of that sort of early years education, primary school education, and indeed also in secondary schools. At an age-appropriate level, trying to help boys and girls understand what a normal, respectful relationship looks like. Because certainly in my experience, in my former role running a homelessness charity for young people in Blackpool, so many of them didn't know what a normal, respectful, non-abusive relationship looked like. Very often because their parents had been in an abusive relationship or a series of abusive relationships. So, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Mrs. Callow's absolutely right. Huge amounts of work needs to go on in this field. A lot of it is starting, but I think for far too long we've dealt with the symptoms of this problem. We've dealt with it at the women's refuge end of the problem, which of course absolutely vital service, need to be there. You know, really pleased that we've always maintained our funding for such services here in Blackpool. But there is a huge amount of work needs to go on with young children to as Councillor Mrs. Callow put it, to nip it in the bud and make sure it doesn't start happening in the first place. Because once people have that attitude towards life and that attitude towards women, then sadly it's very, very hard to shift. So I just absolutely support everything that she says.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions on page 20? 21. I'll turn over quickly. 22. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to have to handle this very carefully because I believe that there has been an inquest on this case. Once again, I was reading the newspaper when I was on holiday, and I read that this was no way to treat a D-Day hero. And this was an elderly gentleman in Blackpool that was in our care, and very, very sadly, he died. And it really did upset me. It named the company that we use, and what I want to know, Mr. Mayor, is how many of our elderly residents are cared for by this company? Are we going to continue to use them? Because this report, if it's accurate, was really hair-raising, that this gentleman was left overnight by a fire. He couldn't move and his leg was roasted away. For that to happen to anybody, somebody who'd been a D-Day veteran, an elderly gentleman, vulnerable in our care, for this to happen. And I know I've got to be very careful because I don't know the outcome yet of the inquest, but I want a full report for all councillors when this is finalised, and I want to know what steps are going to be made to check the level of care given to our vulnerable elderly people who most of the time have nobody to turn to but to this council for care, and how many are left in a state like this. In this day and age, it's absolutely disgraceful, and I just want some answers, and I want a full report to all the councillors. And Mr. Mayor, I won't let this drop. If I'm not satisfied with the outcome, then I will raise it over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Still on page 22. 23. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's in regard to the delivery of the Amazing Animals course. I'd like to commend Councillor Henderson, unfortunately she had to leave early, of the work she's been doing with guide dogs in some of the schools in her area. And I'd like Councillor Kane to talk to Councillor Henderson and introduce this even further into other schools. They do a wonderful job training these dogs. They're quite marvellous. I think some young children aren't quite sure or aware of the work that goes in and how much money is needed to support these guide dogs. So I'd be very grateful if Councillor Kane could have that conversation with Councillor Henderson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more on 23? Page 24. Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the delivery of Keys to Your Home initiative, very interested to see that you've delivered 11 courses and 108 learners have completed the course. But could we please have some outcomes? How many of those people have found accommodation? How many of them have maintained their tenancies? Has the delivery of those achieved some success? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on page 24? No? General questions? Are there any? No? Thank you very much. Councillor Kane to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just regarding the number of looked after children, as of Monday this week at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the number was 532, which is a reduction. What I can just correct on this situation is the cost. We have already taken out some of the high costings since the new director took place. So the actual bit about the costings growing is incorrect, factually incorrect. The actual cost of the high placements are actually coming down. The numbers are coming down, and the numbers that are going entering into the care system there are now systems in place to monitor those. And before there was the system did have some flaws in that we've recognised, and those have been seen by the new director and myself, and those have been closed down now. So there's less people, and there's much more of a strategic oversight from the Children's Service Management team in regarding to those people coming into care. There's issues that we've got that we're working on with partner agencies And now the simple answer is not for putting a child into care. We're centering the child at the centre of everything that we do. So it's what is right for the child, and it not necessarily is bringing them into care. There's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of people that need further assessments, but we are looking, and I will say that again, that the cost is coming down, and we are looking at how we reduce that overall number, and a lot of work is going on. We will report back. The numbers, like I say, are not just, you know, we can give the figure out every time, but it's important to recognise some of the work that's going on behind the scenes. And we mentioned about scrutiny, and I'm sure that Councillor Williams is well aware that his team on the scrutiny are very impressed with what they're now receiving at scrutiny. And I believe that if that's a scrutiny report was to come to this chamber, and that report is available, Mr Mayor, it's a cross-party scrutiny, and I can assure you and the rest of the chamber this evening that there are quite a lot of challenging questions, and if people have got an interest, then please come along, because it's not just the members of that committee. You know, you're welcome to come along and to see some of the detail that is shared with that committee. And again, it's cross-party, and there are very, very challenging questions that are had to the director and to myself. So those things are taking place. We have got, we refer to the school improvement, which is in there now. We've got a new children's services improvement board. That's chaired by Tony Crane. He was well respected within the education system and the social care system, and he's holding us to account as well, and that's on a monthly basis, and he works within the DFE. So I'm really pleased with the new strategic way that we're moving forward, and I'm confident that you know, I can say now that I've not been as more confident that that service is going to improve, and it's going to be for the benefit of each child that we have to look after here in Blackpool. We mentioned, Councillor Galley, you said about the health strategy. Is it teaching people to cook? Yes, it is. It's doing everything that it can do. We know the problems that we face. Really good that we've got some of the cafes and the takeaways now picking up healthy options. A lot of work still to be done. But again, the more we can educate people, I think that's the crucial bit there. And teaching people the basics of how to cook on a budget is important, because it's not always stodgy food you need. You can make substantial meals just by putting a few extra little herbs and spices into food. So a lot of work going on there. I'm going to a conference on Friday because of what we've done with healthy eating, being the first local authority to sign the declaration, our NHS colleagues being the first NHS organisation at the Teaching Hospital at Victoria. They were the first to adopt it within the NHS. So Blackpool's being, of all the negatives, this is good because we're being held in high esteem of what we're doing and acknowledging that. You mentioned about the budget scrutiny and 450 looked after children going into 2019-2020. I wish I could guarantee it, but I can't. But I want that figure to be less than 450 and from the current 532. And if the plans come through to fruition, then that should hopefully be less, because I'm looking at it being a lot less than 450. Councillor Galley, again, you mentioned about the homeless reduction and the Act. It's in conjunction with the council plan. We do want to reduce the homeless, so lots of work going on there across the council and across multi-agencies. You know, we've got several organisations involved. I've been at a meeting this morning with the Fulfilling Lives project, which is helping people who've got either homeless, mental health or drug and alcohol problems. So it all combines into our plan to reduce that. Councillor Clapham, you mentioned the bit about the 16 to 17-year-olds and what happens when they get 18. And again, we're looking at this as like what happens with our looked after children when they come out from getting to that age. We're putting some wraparound support around those, giving them supported living, and also working with their personal advisors to ensure that they've got the necessary skills to see them into adulthood. So we're continually working there, work going on with Connections that's downstairs, the Vulnerable Adolescent Hub. Lots of work going on there, and again, cross-party, the corporate parent panel, certainly the people that looked after the children in the town that looked after, certainly hold each and every one of us to account on that corporate parent, and again, that's cross-party, the position, cross-party committee. You mentioned Councillor Mrs Carroll, Councillor Williams, Councillor Blackburn, this bit about violence against women and girls. I'm not wearing it today because I've just changed my suit, but I am a white ribbon ambassador, which is linked in with this. A lot of work's going on, lots of conferences. Really proud of the money that we've been given. I think you mentioned how is it going to be, what are we going to do about teaching people, teaching boys. I think Mrs. Kelly, you mentioned teaching boys at the right age. Councillor Blackburn, you mentioned that when the age is right to educate them. There's a whole raft of initiatives that are coming out, and I do welcome the money. However, I think someone mentioned about the affordability. Councillor Williams, you welcome the fund, future affordability. Hopefully we can sustain and find out the good work that we've done with that initial project. We've got to look at service transformation of what we're offering throughout the whole package. The work that we're doing along with the other projects like Better Start and Head Start is going to be quite crucial as well, linking all that in together. We just say the greater awareness and support. We have a wraparound support for people that are vulnerable to violence, and we do understand that it's not just in the home, it's everywhere. But again, we'll bring that back and give you an update of where that's going, because I think it's vital that you are on board with everything that's going on there, and whether that's through scrutiny. I haven't got a problem bringing you a report back here on the progress of where we're up to and the steps that we've taken, because I think it is recognised that a lot of the time it's getting people to speak up about it, because we've seen some of the horror stories that have appeared in the press recently. We've I talk about this all the time, but a key priority is child sexual exploitation, violence against with all people, violence full stop. We've got things that we're constantly reviewing. Human trafficking is a big one at the moment. It's not a problem here in Blackpool, but again, it's all this that links together, and the more that we can share across the parties on this one, this isn't anything to get into a political argument about. I think we're all in this together, and I do welcome your support and also your participation to enable us from Blackpool to ensure that we are looking after the most vulnerable as a priority without any underwriting of if somebody's vulnerable, then we've got a duty to support them, and I hope that I get that from throughout the chamber, Mr Mayor. Mrs Callow, you talk about the D-Day veteran. I'd like to publicly say follow our deepest condolences on behalf of the chamber, Mr Mayor, through your good office, to the family of the D-Day veteran. You mentioned about you want to see the full report, so do I, and I have not got any problem as whatsoever with presenting that, because I think that everybody needs to be aware of it. I've got Councillor Cross, who is having daily updates on, she's got one-to-ones every week with the Director of Adult Social Services. We do expect and demand that we get the highest possible care that we can from our providers. They are monitored. However, in this case, what we've seen in the public domain at the moment was that this person was severely let down by the carer, and not the care, that whilst it was an individual carer that we've seen that's been publicly reported, the care provider has reviewed their situation in light of that, and it's a dreadful situation, and all I can say is that I will share everything that comes out from a social care review of that provider, and also from the coroner, because the coroner sits in my portfolio as well. So I think it would, you know, I would welcome something there. In fact, I don't want to promise something I can't deliver, but I would think it would be useful if we can arrange something with the coroner and other appropriate people to have a thorough review. I don't want to just say a scrutiny review, but I think we certainly need something where we can sit down initially in private, but then, you know, get the in-depth from the coroner, etc. Because I think it is an absolute appalling situation. It's deeply regrettable. The injury that the man sustained through the fire was part of other health problems, but that was significant, I believe. It was absolutely appalling, and I can't say any more than what I've said already, so I think we'll just leave it with that.
I did ask how many of our people in Blackpool this company were caring for, and if we're going to keep it.
Councillor Cross will respond to you just when I've finished on that one, if you can, please. Councillor Williams, the request to speak with Councillor Henderson regarding the garden, of course we will, because I think I just concur with what you're saying, it is good. So, yeah, we'll get that sorted, okay? Mrs Scott, sorry, this is the last one. Regarding will you get the outcomes? Yes, we'll report the outcomes, no problem with that. Okay, I'll just stand it back to Councillor Cross to talk to you about the care home. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mrs Kello, I will get back to you with the exact figures. I've been monitoring this with our Director of Adult Social Care quite closely. Obviously, I'm going to be very careful about what I do and don't say, because what is and isn't in the public domain at the moment. But as soon as the review is completed, then obviously we will have more information for you. What I must say is that when we became aware of this, we started a service review straight away on the service that was in question. We were in the process of getting together statements from both service users and from carers that were involved in that, and along with the company. The only reason why we stopped doing that was because obviously it was then taken to legal services, so we had to stop our involvement there when legal got involved. And as soon as that went to the inquest, obviously we have to be very careful about what we do and don't do with processes. So as soon as the full service review is complete, including the review of the inquest, then I'll be able to give you some more information and a proper update.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. We now move to the Councillor-appointed Combined Fire Authority representative. The report to the Council, and it's Councillor Jackson, Councillor Williams, and I believe it's Councillor Mrs Coleman who will be speaking. Is that correct? Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a new member to the Combined Fire Authority, I've been asked to give this report. But before I give it, I would just like to say that I attended the Safe Drive Stay Alive session this afternoon in the Winter Gardens. It's hosted by Lancashire Fire Rescue in partnership with emergent services and families affected of road collisions to present real-life stories and share emotional experiences to support the reduction of young people killed or seriously injured on Lancashire's roads. To date, just under 14,000 students have seen the hard-hitting educational programme, and I would ask every member to attend, if they can, to this moving and real eye-opener. I have great pleasure in giving you this report, and I will try and ask any questions that anybody has. And I'm sure if I get stuck, Councillor Jackson and Councillor Williams will be able to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions on page 25? (26) 27 28 Any further questions? General questions? Thank you. It's back to you, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you for that. No comment.
I hope you didn't find that too difficult. Thank you. We now go to agenda item number 6, committee membership, and it's Councillor Blackburn to move recommendation. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendations outlined in paragraph 2 of the report to agree the appointment of Councillor Vicky Singleton as the Vice Chairman of the Appeals Committee and to agree that Yvonne Russell be appointed as the independent co-opted member of the Audit Committee.
Thank you. The motion will be seconded by Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the Chair of the Audit Committee, it gives me great pleasure to second the motion. I'm sure Yvonne Russell will be a great addition to the team, and I very much look forward to this journey that we're embarking on to make our Audit Committee one of the best in the UK. And this recruitment will help that process. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Well said. Any other councillors like to speak on this issue? Oh, thank you. Councillor Kane.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, it's only a typo. It should be chairman, not chairmen, in 2.1.
I was hoping somebody picked that up. Thank you. Any more councillors wish to speak? Then Councillor Blackburn, you're right to reply. Nothing to say, thank you. Okay, we now move on then. We have the vote, yes, and it's all those in favour, please show. Against? Overwhelming. Thank you. Item 7, relationships with companies. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the recommendations outlined at section 2 of the report, specifically draw members' attention to the recommendations of the Independent Remuneration Panel regarding the appropriate level of allowance for the posts that we propose to create.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I check if there are a nomination for chairman?
And to confirm that it's my intention to appoint Councillor Ivan Taylor to chair the committee before he changes his mind.
Thank you. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Campbell, I believe.
Formally second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to speak? Thank you. You have a right to reply, sir. Do we need the vote? We need a vote? Yep. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. 8A, independent regulatory body for football. Councillor Williams to move.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I bring this motion to full council as a motion of common sense. I'm not applying this particularly to our own problems in the town with our own football club and the dispute between the fans, but my comments, my thoughts on this issue are well documented and have been in the media. I was invited to sit on a panel quite recently which was chaired by Jamie Fuller, who is the chairman of a clothing manufacturing company called Skins. It was the best piece of common sense I'd heard in football for a long, long time. Other clubs such as Leyton Orient, Leeds and the town's own club have all got high media coverage for the wrong reasons. And the only way we can prevent this, or stop it, or build on it, is to have an intermediary. And I don't believe that this can be done by an independent, even though it's been tried. There may still be some foot ground for that. But this independent regulatory body would be a cross-party body committed by the government to look at ownership of clubs, look at the way the finances are controlled, look at the way the investment is controlled. It's quite easy for the FA to regulate for mistakes on the pitch, but they have absolutely no power at all off the pitch in terms of the owners. If this type of regulatory body had been in place sooner, I don't think we would have had problems in our own town or many of the other towns that are in there. So the report speaks for itself, and I'm hoping that all members can support this, and we can try and put an end to disputes between clubs and fans, and try and build on community sports. Every football club is a community enterprise. Its problems, its lack of income, affects all the community. It affects local businesses, it affects familyness, being together to go to games, etc. We have to find ways of doing it, and I think this is an excellent way of protecting the future of those disputes. And I hope that all members tonight, Mr. Mayor, will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other councillors to speak?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Seconded.
Councillor Stansfield.
Councillor Stansfield, thank you.
I wish to formally second that notice of motion.
Thank you. Other councillors to speak? Thank you. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I speak for most Labour members when I say that we will support this motion, as our party has included proposals for new football governance measures in our last two general election manifestos. And whilst Councillor Williams deserves some credit in his attempts to resolve the issue of Bloomfield Road and for bringing this motion to Council, I must sound a note of caution, as the current government has a track record of putting wealthy club owners first and completely ignoring fans. Only last year they blocked fans from having greater say in their clubs by effectively extinguishing Clive Effort's proposed football governance supporters participation bill that would put fans on boards of directors as per the greater aims of the BST. So on receipt of the proposed letter from the Council, I really hope that Mrs May exercises her infamous strong and stable leadership and acts to quickly set up this regulatory body to take clubs to task who ignore their fans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to speak on this issue? Thank you, Councillor Taylor, Senior.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Mr Mayor, follow on from that, because I do support this motion, which is not surprising, given it's the Labour Party policy, which was put up, as was said, in the last election, the one before, and which were actually rejected by the Conservative Party. What cheers me up a little bit is that Councillor Williams and the Conservative members appear to be, notwithstanding the position of their national party, are taking a different view. And I think that encourages us to think that between us, we might be able to have some influence, at least as far as this council is concerned, in getting a reform of the way local football is operating in this country, and that is long overdue. As a supporter of Blackpool FC, could I take this opportunity of really thanking all those over the last couple of years who tried to influence for the better the situation within the Blackpool club and its fans. And I say particularly to Councillor Blackburn, because I know the work that he has put in discussions. Well, it's always been successful, but I know the work he's put into it, as so have other people, and including Councillor Williams. So a lot of people have been trying to help to resolve some of these issues. I do very much they are soon resolved, because they do nobody any good. And Blackpool Football Club has a very long history. It will have a long future too. It's doing well this season. I think we're all, whichever side we may be on this particular dispute, all fans must be delighted to see them in the top end of the of League One and in a really good position possibly to go back into the Championship. it's really exciting. But when we do get into that position, and again into the Premiership, we want all fans to be there. And I hope by that time, and I hope it's not too far off, we can resolve some of these issues in a satisfactory way. So again, my thanks for all those who made a contribution to that process. You'd be surprised to know this, but I'm not a great reader of social media. But I have been told that there's been some comments there to affect the Council of Blackburn and the Council somehow against the fund. I don't know where they possibly get that from. I've not missed any meetings here, and I've listened to carefully what's been said. There's been nothing to suggest that at all. So I think there's some mischief-making been going on as far as that's concerned. This council is not against any fans of Blackpool Football Club. Far from it. We support them very much, and I'm sure that that's the position that Councillor Blackburn is going to reiterate today.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Lovely little segue, Mr. Mayor. One of the joys of webcasting these meetings, of course, is that they are preserved for eternity, and you can return to them and remind yourself of what you said and what other people said. And on the 20th of January last year, in response to Mr. Higgins from the Blackpool Supporters Trust who came to talk to us, I said, and people might want to get their notebooks out and sharpen their pencils at this point, I said the Labour Party nationally was adopting a policy which was contained in our manifesto at the last general election, and indeed was in our manifesto at the most recent general election, which supported what Mr. Higgins was asking for, and it supports what the Supporters Trust have asked for, and basically encapsulates Councillor Williams' motion tonight. I referred to the fact, again, as Councillor Hobson has said, that Clive Efford, Labour's Shadow Sports Minister, had launched in October 2014 a proposal which proposed the biggest legislative shake-up of the English and Welsh football clubs since the advent of the game. There ends the quote, Mr. Mayor. So this is something that we have consistently argued for. It's something that the Labour Party has consistently argued for. Unfortunately, on the one occasion that this was debated on the floor of the House of Commons, when the Labour Party introduced it, the Conservatives voted it down. So I'm pleased to see Councillor Williams' support for this. I hope that his influence will make a difference with the Conservative Party in Westminster and that they'll change their minds. So, Mr. Mayor, as I said in January last year, and I say again now, we do want the fans to have this level of control and influence. It's absolutely right. As a Blackburn Rovers fan, I understand what it's like. Thank you. I'm well aware. I understand exactly what it's like to have owners who appear to be at odds with the ambitions of the fans and the ambitions of the club. Having a fan on the board of the club and having a degree of control over the club makes absolute common sense. I agree that it would help to begin to resolve some of the issues that exist here in Blackpool. I welcome the motion, and all of the Labour members are going to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak on this issue? Councillor Mr. Scott, what's that? Oh, oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Williams on this motion, and particularly the fans who have brought this matter forward. It's been a cause close to my heart for a great deal of time now. Problems in Blackpool may be relatively recent, but the problems across Britain have been long-standing. You know, as time progresses, I'd like to think we got closer to solving these problems. In many places, we're moving in exactly the wrong direction. It's almost as though we were moving back to Victorian times with wealthy owners dictating, and sometimes even interfering in things like the colour of the strip. Absolutely appalling the way they're concerned. Councillor Hobson's point is absolutely correct, of course. If the country had voted for Labour in either of the two previous general elections, this reforms would already be in place. There would be supporters on the board of Blackpool Football Club. They would have right to all the information. They would be in control. It's absolutely important we support this, and it's important at a national level. Parties support this, and it becomes government policy. We're here to support the supporters. That's what the game's all about. Let's join together on this matter.
Thank you. Yeah, you'll be coming in a moment, Councillor Williams, won't you? Are there any other councillors wishing to speak on this issue? Thank you. Then you're right to reply, Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that this was in the Labour manifesto, but not quite in this essence. They did want a regulatory body and they did want a shared panel, if you like, with fans on that panel. But it didn't go so far as to say there would be criteria set out in regards to the funding of clubs and where that funding went. And essentially that in turn, I think, has also disrupted the game. The fact that clubs are being promoted when they're bankrupt is not acceptable. The fact that clubs are in dispute with financiers, can lose losses of £150 million a say, well, it doesn't matter. We've got plenty of money. I think that's what's important within this motion, is to form this regulatory body, give that extra pair of teeth, and not just controlling the fans say on the board, which is important, but it's controlling the whole financial system within clubs, that both the fans and the directors and owners of the clubs have to abide by a certain criteria. And the definitive point of that is, if they don't, they won't. They'll be out. And that's not just fan control, that's regulatory and it's honesty. And I think that's where it should be. I thank my colleagues for supporting the motion. It would be a cross-party motion anyway in Parliament, and I'll do my best, and whatever Mr Fuller thinks I can do in supporting this. And I still continue to work and have dialogue with both the owners and the fans to try and come to some resolution in Blackpool. And I'm hopeful still that that can happen, but there are some big steps to take. But I'm willing to carry on. So thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. We now move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? It is unanimous. Thank you. I wonder if you good people on the upper shelf there are wanting to stay, or are there some of you wanting to go before the end of the meeting? If you'd like to go now, we will give you a minute if that's in order. I trust that meets with your approval. Someone has to be last. Well done. Thank you. Right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We now move on to 8B. The motion is NJC Pay Claim 2018. Councillor Campbell to move.
Mr Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to propose the notice of motion which stands in my name on the order paper. The public sector pay freeze was dreamt up by the Conservative-led coalition government. They applied the principle that the bankers had brought the nation to its knees financially, so it was only right and proper that hard-working, underpaid public servants made sacrifices. Like so much of the Tories' economics, Mr Mayor, it simply doesn't add up. Like cutting taxes for the wealthiest people in the country, like the bedroom tax, like the campaign being waged against people on disability benefits. Inflation continues to rise, reaching almost 3% last week. Prices continue to rise, yet NJC basic pay has fallen in real terms by more than 20% since the Conservatives came to power. Let's put that in terms which even they would understand. That means that for every 5 items you need from the supermarket, you've got to put 1 back on the shelf. That means that if you've got a modest 2-bedroomed terraced house with a kitchen, a bathroom and a dining room, you've got to decide which room isn't getting heated. That's the reality for many public sector workers. Our staff here in Blackpool have made huge additional sacrifices in order to help protect jobs and enable us to continue to deliver services to the public. As well as seeing their pay effectively cut by 20% in 7 years, they've agreed to take unpaid leave, they've agreed to pay to park at work, and they've worked with us on other changes to their terms and conditions, which means that they have to work harder for less money. They do all of that because they, like us on this side of the chamber, believe passionately in the value of public service. But enough is enough. These false Tory economics have got to stop. 2017 has seen 5 major terrorist attacks on UK soil, and a further 6 major attacks foiled by the security services. It has seen the Grenfell Tower disaster. The people who responded to those events, both in the short and the long term, all had one thing in common. They were public servants. Fire, police, ambulance responders, public servants. Doctors and nurses, public servants. Educational psychologists and grief counsellors, public servants. Social workers and housing officers, public servants. Emergency planners and rest centre staff, public servants. Many of them off-duty public servants, given their time and putting themselves in a very real and terrifying sense of the word, directly in the line of fire. Mr. Mayor, we must stand united behind each and every public sector worker in the UK, whether they wear a uniform or not, whether they work in London or elsewhere, whether they are civil servants working behind the scenes or highly visible counter-terrorism support officers. We in Blackpool look after our own. Let's look after our staff and force the government into doing what we in the Labour Party have been saying for a long time now, giving local government employees a decent wage rise and to fully fund that from the Treasury. There can be no buck passing, no weasel words about councils managing the pay rise from existing resources. They need to pay up, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Collett to second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was absolutely delighted to hear the government's proposals to start stripping back the public sector pay cap last week, but it doesn't go far enough. We learned that there will be no resources made from government to help fund these pay rises, and there are still thousands of public sector workers still affected by this pay cap. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
You don't have to apologise.
Case of dry mouth. Like I said, there will be no resources made by government to help fund these pay rises. What the government is asking local authorities to do, such as ours, is to make a choice between delivering the vital public services that we make and give to our residents that they depend upon, or choose between giving some of our lowest paid workers that work for our council a decent pay rise, a pay rise that they have not had for 10 years, a pay rise that they have not had for 10 years, and in real terms have had their wage cut. We get the same answers every time. There is no money. There is no magic money tree. Where is the money going to come from? But Theresa May seems to have found some wheat fields of gold, because there was 1.5 billion for the DUP. There was 6 million extra for the Queen. There have been tax cuts for the rich. So surely there are some pennies left in the bottom of the jar for our nurses and our teachers and our public sector workers and our council workers. It's only fair, as Councillor Campbell has just said, enough is enough. People are struggling, they're working harder, councils are trying to make their budget stretch further, and that will mean cutting services to try and pay people properly. Our council workers are trying to stretch their wages further in order to make the decision of whether to eat or to heat. Enough is enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've already discussed, we are quite prepared to support this motion. And as you may have already said, Theresa May has been put in a position where she has now taken the cap away. The amount of funding, or where the funding is going to lie from, I think is not finally decided. I think that will have to be decided elsewhere. But it's interesting, I don't agree with all the cuts, and I don't agree that they came in as quickly as they did when they did. But I do understand the reasons why we had those cuts, and I'm not going to reiterate over those reasons. We all know why they're there. But having said that, I think some of the services you mentioned, we need to look at sort of what reserves these services are carrying in their bank accounts, because you'd be quite shocked. You'd be quite shocked to find out how much property, empty property, the National Health actually owns. Millions. You'd be shocked and surprised how much the Fire Authority, even our own, is holding in bank accounts in reserves. Millions. And I dare say that's echoed throughout the country. But having said that, I do believe the JC Joint Board is right. That cap should be lifted. These people work extremely hard under very difficult conditions. And on that basis, and I hope we don't get any more political, because we're going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to congratulate Councillor Campbell and Councillor Collett for their speeches. Just on a point of idle curiosity, Councillor Williams, I thought about half an hour ago, told me that we should be having more money in reserves than we've got at the moment. But now he's concerned that other people have got too much in reserves. Perhaps he could persuade them to lend us a few bob, and then he'll be happy. I think it's really important to get to the bottom of this issue of funding. Whatever pay rise is awarded to local government employees, and I do hope it will be substantial, is that is fully funded by the government. That is recognised that is a new burden on councils and therefore is fully funded. Because if it isn't, it won't just mean there will be redundancies, because there are no real redundancies left to make. What it will mean is it will be service cuts. It will be services that people, by and large, very vulnerable people, rely on. So that is really, really important that the government makes a commitment to fund that. And I don't think we can take what the government says on this at face value, because we only need to cast our minds back a few months to when minister after minister was making public statements about the fact that money would be no object in the wake of the Grenfell Tower disaster. They made it very clear, and I thought that enough ministers had made enough public statements that money would not be an issue, that they couldn't possibly roll back from that. Now we find ourselves in a position where the government is saying that councils need to meet those bills from within existing resources. There are no existing resources, certainly not in housing terms, because of the housing revenue account borrowing cap. Yet, as Councillor Collett points out, there's money for plenty of other things. There's no money, it would appear, for fire prevention. There is no money yet on the table for prevention of redundancy and prevention against service cuts. But there's £1.5 billion for election prevention it would appear, in terms of the DUP deal. So the money is there. The magic money tree appears to be alive and kicking when they want it to be. It's our job to make sure they understand that it needs to be giving in this context and give our staff a decent pay rise. I do hope everybody's going to support this, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Benson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have no hesitation in supporting this motion and hope this chamber can be unanimous in that. Local government workers are possibly the lowest paid of all public service workers. They provide an invaluable service at the heart of our community. They keep our children safe, they feed our children and look after some of our most vulnerable citizens. They run our libraries, they maintain our parks and green spaces, keep our streets clean and generally are the first port of call when a resident has a problem. Blackpool Council local government employees in the last 7 years have bared the brunt of austerity. Pay freezes, changes to their paying conditions in the last 7 years, most workers are now generally worse off. This authority has seen hundreds of redundancies in the last 7 years, which has added pressure to their existing workforce. New recruits and experienced staff are essential to smooth running of services. Yet poverty pay means local authorities are struggling to attract and hold on to staff, and those left are doing more for less. Our vital and unappreciated staff need a pay rise to compensate for almost a decade of real-term pay cuts. This is what they need and deserve. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions? Anyone else want to speak? Thank you. Forgive me a moment. Councillor to respond. Councillor Campbell.
Nothing further to add. I just hope everyone can
Thank you.
agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor to vote on the motion. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? Unanimous. Thank you. Oh, sorry? Was it not? Do forgive me, I missed someone then. Could I have the... Was there an abstention?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, I was a civil servant for 20 odd years.
I'm sorry.
The vote's been taken. The vote's been taken, Mr Mayor.
Sorry?
The vote's been taken.
The vote is taken. Can we just leave it at that, please? Thank you. We now move on to the final motion, 8C, Minister for Older People. Councillor Mrs Wright to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Don't know that everybody is aware that I'm the older person's champion for Blackpool Council, and I know, I agree. But I prefer to say the champion for the older person instead of the older person's champion. I think it sounds a little better. And through this network that I attend, there is 30 other local authorities throughout the North West. So it's cross-party, we're unpolitical there, and over several years we've written to previous Prime Ministers asking for a dedicated minister for the older person. And each time we end up with the letters being passed back through health or through pensions, and they try and lump you with somebody else. So our latest campaign is that we're writing to every MP in England, asking for their support. I do know that one from South Ribble is working with Nigel Evans regarding doing an early day motion, and several of us are going forward to do a notice of motion. So I'll just read you a little from the letter that has gone to the MPs. The seismic increase in our ageing population needs a dedicated minister for older people, that is over 50s.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I think there should be some declarations of interest.
To ensure that there are skilled
enabled and allowed to contribute fully to society. Drawing together older people's policies and legislation to empower older people, individuals, is essential to achieve this objective. It is about much more than health and pensions. It is about life, and life without boundaries, with education, skills and employment, community and social activities, living well within our overarching ethos of an inclusive society. It is imperative that all stages of life are embraced in a holistic way. We need directives and arrangements for people and their carers living with dementia to ensure our current and future generations are able to live well with this incurable brain disease. We need government action for the growing numbers of lonely and isolated people in our society, which will increase essentially, I can't say the word. Yes, thank you, Kat. With longer life expectancy, along with cognitive and physical impairment. The government cannot respond from silos. A cross-government approach is crucial to interpret the nature and profound implications of this demographic transformation, to stimulate changes across many aspects of our life, how we work, the way we live and use technology, how we interact and care for each other and adapt to the built environment in which we live and work. So I'm hoping that members will support me in this and when it comes to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Kirkland does second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'd like to second this motion and just a few comments. I know it's the end of the night. I think there's been a lot of points tonight that have been talking about our most vulnerable people, and obviously some of the elderly aren't as lucky to have family members who are supportive and listen to them and visit them and have that social contact. I think, as Councillor Wright has just said, it's about accountability. At the minute, some of the decisions and the policies that are being made in government are cross-subject areas, and somebody needs to be made accountable for some of the big decisions that are being made and having such a profound impact upon the elderly members of our family and friends. So I think this is more about, you know, holding our government to account. Lots of work's going on locally and regionally, and the network's being set up, but it's stopping at one level of government. So I think we need to all agree on this motion and make sure that we are supporting our elderly members properly.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak on this subject? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Of course we should have a Minister for Older People, and I'm not talking selfishly on that one. People are living longer, they're living older. They're living older? They're living longer years, and they're living a lot longer. And it's quite significant that the challenges facing older people today are far different than they were 40, 50 years ago. Technology is a lot to learn. Banking online is a lot to learn, and that's why our own older person's education needs a bit of a bump as well. We all know that. But it's not just governments that need to be held to account, it's councils as well. We all have an opportunity and work to do in that field, and we mustn't forget these people. So I welcome the proposal. I think we should. Whether or not 50 is the good threshold bar, I'm not so sure. I'll have to ask some of my younger members. Raise it, yeah, let's raise it a bit. Yeah, I mean, would it not work around pension age? But that seems to have disappeared now. I mean, we're all working, and lots of us are well over pension age. But I do agree with it, and I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I support this motion. Motion, of course, is about join-up thinking within government. Wouldn't that be a good idea? I think most of us would agree with that. Just have a look through the wording. I thought for a few seconds, actually, that there might be some implication that the present government have been a success in disability terms, and Councillor Wright has assured me that that's not what you meant. Because after all, I think it's been a disgrace. It was only February this year the government actually introduced emergency legislation so that they could ignore the advice of two separate tribunals and that they could withhold personal independent payments from 160,000 people. that was this government. Of course, we know about the present controversy where the government's encouraging the railway companies to remove guards from all trains so they won't be able to help disabled people. So those are two examples, but this is about a minister for older people. It's about holding the government to account. It's about joined up thinking in government, working together for the benefit of such a large section of the community. I support this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Right, thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Wright. Right to reply.
No, I'm happy to go straight to the vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will take a vote on the motion. All in favour? I believe that's unanimous. I can't see an abstention. I couldn't make it down anyway. Anyone against? No. Thank you. That vote is carried unanimously, and I have to say before you leave, another 20 years' time, I'll be in that 50-year-old range. Thank you all. That concludes this meeting.